Good Monday morning of the second week of Easter. I'm doing this. This is weeks in advance. I get nervous because I'm afraid I won't get it done. I have to tell you, this is an interesting week. It's all the readings are from chapters. What is it? 4 and 5 actually of the Acts of the Apostles. And John's Gospel is 3, 4, and 6. 3, 4, 5, and 6. I'm saying it wrong, but it's almost direct continuity. It's interesting because the first chapter, today, and the readings from Acts, it's the early church. It's the early preaching of the church as the apostles preach into their own culture, okay, and the conflict that will raise. And John brings it to a theoretical level. I say this at Mass in St. Mark's. I love St. John. St. John, I think I would call him a religious genius because he lived to be an old man. He had time to think it out and see it all. And he had also this poetic, mystical genius about him. He sees the whole, and he writes at a level preaches at a level that transcends the ordinary. He touches the real at a profound level. That's why I think the church turns to John when she wants to celebrate her great mystery, the great mystery of who and what is Christ. She turns to John. See, I'm not taking away from the synoptics. Okay, synoptic, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but John's a genius. They're not. I guess I could say it. That was crude. But he had time. He had lived through the martyrdom of the apostles. He understood how the church is born out of the side of Christ. You don't see that in the synoptics. You see the depth and beauty and power of John's gospel, of the crucifixion especially, and in the life of the church. He sees the suffering of the church as fulfilling the suffering of Christ, as St. Paul did, especially the late writings of Paul. These guys saw it, and I think their faith derived from their experience of the life of the church itself. I really believe that. My view, for whatever it's worth, of Revelation is it occurs in the historical moments. As the church reflects upon herself, she goes, oh, now I get it. It's that. Life is the final teacher, as it were. The final revelation comes from the life of the church, living her life, preaching her gospel. As she preaches, she learns what she's preaching about, who she's preaching about, see, and what she suffers for preaching it. They're going to get martyred. They play rough in the sandbox. And I was thinking about that. Let me just share a thought, whatever it's worth to you. It's more and more dawning on me, for whatever it's worth. In my philosophy religion class, I shown the movie Black Robes. I don't know. It was an Australian filmmaker. It's about the Jesuit missions here in the United States, but long before the United, here in America. Okay, and it takes place in 1634, and it's this young Jesuit, Belgian Jesuit, who travels up the St. Lawrence River. He goes all the way up into the Great Lakes regions, and as he enters a true wilderness. But he's with Native Americans, and as he goes, he's going into a culture highly foreign to his own. He abandons, as it were, leaves behind the 3,000-year culture of the Mediterranean world, as it were, Europe, okay? And he enters a real, genuine wilderness with people of the wilderness, of a culture of the wilderness. And he had to learn as well as to preach. And you can catch the foreignness of his preaching. They're sitting there saying, what's this clown talking about? What's he doing? When he baptizes somebody, they think it's magic. They think he's demonic. See? And he thinks they're demonic. The wilderness, the realm of the devil. For them, is the realm of life. What he brings is disease, and a foreign language and a foreign culture. You see? And he learns. Barely, but he learns. You see? When the church preaches into her culture, she learns as well as she preaches. And I think whatever this is worth, I think we're in the second greatest age of the church, to be honest about it. I say this at St. Mark's all the time, struck me, because we're a global community now. For the first time, we are preaching the gospel fully to the whole world. We did initially. I believe St. Thomas went to India. But now it's China, India, Asia, Africa, the entire world. The gospel is being preached to it. And it's a world that is both welcoming and foreign and hostile. We're entering the new age of martyrdom, I think. Maybe a martyrdom of spirit as much as a martyrdom of blood and flesh. We'll see. But I think we are also having to preach to our own, just as the early apostles were preaching to their own, to the Jews, to their own people. Because our culture, Western civilization, has abandoned the root of its Christianity, its Christian roots. It's still there in some remnant form, but it isn't no longer perceived and received as the wisdom of the West. It's been replaced. It started in the Renaissance, but especially in the 17th, 18th century. And we have secularized our culture dramatically. So the church, in preaching to ourselves in our cultures, is preaching into a foreign culture, a foreign-making culture. We're not there yet, but we're on the way to really a radically complete secular culture. We're close to that now. So she is a missionary to herself. She has to preach to herself. And she's not well received, or she's going to be looked at as foolish, just like the Native American saw the Jesuit as demonically foolish. Didn't make sense anymore. You see, they didn't make sense. Okay? And the world that we're preaching to has become sufficiently foreign that it doesn't make sense to us. We are part of a world that doesn't reflect the depth of the Christianity that founded it. I'm talking about the West. I think that's true. I think we have lost 3 generations for whatever reasons. Lots of reasons. One, the most fundamental, is the radical secularization of its own culture. But also, I think the changing of the church through the Second Vatican Council, but bigger than that. See, I think I'm a great fan of John the 23rd. I think he saw 2 things. The West had to be re-evangelized. He had lived through the First and Second World War. Was it Benedict XVI said the 20th century is a century of horror? You take the first half of it, roughly 80 million people were killed in those 2 wars. That makes a pandemic look like child play. Think about it. And it was done by Europeans to itself. That's truth. See? So I think he saw the church had to re-evangelize its own culture, the West, but he also saw we were global. And we had to preach the gospel out of love to the people of the world, the whole global community. That's where we are. And it's going to be, I won't see it, but I think our grandchildren and our children and grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, will be the recipients of a true Catholic world, I believe. In this sense, Catholic world, a Catholic church, not a Catholic world, a Catholic church, where the church has got to be universal, not Eurocentric, but universal. We've taken those steps in Vatican II. Now it's going to exploit itself. It will evolve itself. That's the best way to put it. It's a little sloppy this morning, I'm sorry. But I see that. I see it coming. And the church has to re-evangelize her own. But just what St. Paul did, and St. Peter, preach to our own, but at the same time preach to the world. They're going to get kicked out of Jerusalem, and they're going to go to Rome and St. Paul. The world's never been the same. Now we are going from, as it were, Rome to the global community. We live in a great age. We can take nothing for granted. We must preach Christ died, Christ dead and risen. True Christ. Not conventional Christianity, not the church as an institution, but Christ in the church, the living church. That's the truth. We have to preach the gospel from its core, to the whole world.